You are either watching on your YouTube channel or you are listening on Spreaker, Apple, Spotify, or iHeartRadio. My name is Lee Addison. You are listening to episode 35 of the amazing, the fantastic Rugby League Coach podcast. You may be wondering if you are a regular listener or watcher, and most of you seem to listen to us because we're obviously not that good to look at, why I'm hosting for the second week. But that's because, Taylor, you're not at home again, mate. I mean, what's going on? And we're a bit worried about your internet coverage, weren't we?
Yeah, we were. Obviously, last time we started this podcast and I was away, I was in Melbourne and didn't have the best internet coverage.
Yeah.
Currently in Gladstone. And it seems to be, the internet coverage seems to be okay, but I guess as a precaution, we've decided, I know the viewers or listeners will be very disappointed to know Lee's doing 2 weeks in a row. I understand
this is what they asked
people
for.
People set their calendars every fortnight to listen to me, but unfortunately, they're going to have to endure it. The good news is I'll probably get a back-to-back next week and the week after, so everyone can get their fix.
Yeah, I might go on holiday or something. We do have COVID in the house. COVID Chris. We're going to call him this week, Chris Budgeon. He's not got as good a lighting setup as you have, Taylor. So for those watching on YouTube, they're just going to see this silhouette with a fan going around him in a background. And I think this is Chris's theory that if he covers himself in darkness, then the COVID won't spread through the YouTube. How are you feeling, most importantly?
Not too badly. Not too badly. It does come and go. Sometimes I feel pretty average, but sometimes I feel like I'm ready to get up and go again, and it seems to pull me back to earth pretty quick. But I'm just trying to stay in the dark so that you can't see the green around the gills as well.
How many days have you been feeling a bit not yourself?
3 or 4, probably Sundays Sundays when I really started to feel it.
James Varley from the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Have you got COVID? Or if you have or haven't, have you had it before?
I have had it before, Lee, yes. I had a bit of a cold at the end of last week, but I managed to shake it off in 2 days. So
was it COVID last week?
No, it wasn't. No. It was a cold. It was a cold.
Okay. Have you had COVID?
I had it, I had it in 2021. Oh. Yeah, I did.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. And how did it knock you about?
No, I had it back then.
So. You are listening to this COVID special here of the Rugby League Coach podcast.
Mate, how good's Varley? You asked him if he had COVID. He goes, yeah, last week. You said last week?
Last week I had a COVID.
No. Wasn't COVID.
I reckon the problem Varley's got, he's probably still drunk because obviously the British are the best in the world at Rugby League now because St. Helens won the World Club Challenge.
I'm not a believer in being the best.
Okay, go on. Develop that, please.
Well, no, it was a bit of a pre-season game. I just thought, actually, I didn't see the second half because I had my training session with my team, so I had to go and do that. But the first half, I thought that Penrith weren't completing well enough from what I saw.
Yeah,
I thought they were winning. I thought the St. Helens did very well. I thought Penrith were targeting Alex Walmsley early in the game. They seem to be doing that for some extra attention. But I thought Penrith were finding the floor, finding elbows and knees. But then they weren't completed. So
for everyone who wonders, why this is called the Rugby League Coach podcast, well, it's called the Rugby League Coach podcast because the website Rugby League Coach and the Facebook page and everything is the owner of the podcast. But also, everybody here is a coach. So when we talk about Rugby League, and I think this is something that a lot of people forget when they're on socials, and why are you posting about this, Lee? Why are you talking about that? It's because we're allowed to have opinions about the game. And I wish some of those people would come on here and talk to us about them. And that, it's interesting that you missed the second half the other day because you were coaching. I'll go to you, Taylor. I mean, out of all the predictions, I think you and Tim were probably the doomsayers for St. Helens, I think. Maybe, it was you and Tim that sort of thought it was going to go one way. Did you see the game? How did you feel about it? What did you think?
So I was at the 30th and I was seeing bits of the game here and there. And I was sort of waiting to look back at the score and see Penrith had scored 2 quick ones. Or I was in, can I say, a limbo where I was like, okay, they're going very well. But I thought we'd get to a stage where the game would open right up. The reason I say that is because upon most of my differential analysis between Super League and the NRL. I do find the NRL to be a quicker game. I find it to be have more speed. The sets are quicker. So, and English players and that competition typically breed larger forward packs, larger men. And my theory upon that, Lee, you can expand on this if you want to or not, is that because it's so cold in England when they play, and especially during preseason, is that they do actually spend a lot of time in the gym. So that's one thing
there's a slightly different theory. I will expand on it in a minute.
So that's something that I've sort of picked up from my outside in, obviously not having been there or anything like that, but just something I've noticed over the years. So I did sort of expect Penrith to randomly just jump out, dip out. And then I remember I was at this 30th and sort of the speeches were happening, and I got tapped on the shoulder by a mate, and speech was happening, and I was like, give it a rest, and he's tapping me harder and harder and harder. And I'm going, can you, unless there's another pizza coming out, I don't want to hear about it, what I mean? And then I look up and they've kicked a field goal and won. And I thought, immediately I thought, well, this is going to come back and bite me when I come on the Rugby League Coach podcast. That was my first thought. And secondly, I thought, well, it kind of serves me right for writing them off so hard that they would come out and put a doozy on. But I don't necessarily buy into the trial business. It was a very good Penrith side that came out of the pack. It was a good Penrith side. You can't turn around and say, oh, they didn't care or whatever, because they said all week that they did care. So they can't turn around and say they didn't care now.
I don't think Penrith have said that. What did you think of St. Helens, Chris?
I was pleasantly surprised. I actually, it's one of the few games I watched. I actually watched it today. I was at footy myself with a trial game up in Toowoomba on Saturday afternoon, evening. So I was just checking scores and was obviously proven wrong as well. But in watching the game today, I thought, I was quite impressed. What impressed me was that they, in a way, beat Penrith at Penrith's game with some pretty relentless line speed for most of the game. And they got in their face and they took time off them. And I really enjoyed it. It's and
good game of football.
I rarely watch games that I already know the score. And I did enjoy it. I thought they deserved it. I thought Penrith got a bit frustrated. They were a good side, Penrith. There weren't too many missing. And that Wamsley impressed me again. That the fullback, Wellsby, he wouldn't look out of place in any NRL side. And
every name just ends with E or Z or B or Varley.
Very true.
Look, I think so my take is on it. I mean, I knew a lot of British people would jump on it as a big victory for British Rugby League.
Easy.
Well, number one, there's 7 overseas players in that St. Helens team the other day, right? Number 2, Super League is St. Helens and then the rest at the minute. They've won the last 4 Super Leagues. It was only a couple of years ago they won the league, the minor premiership, the league leaders shield by 20 points or something. They have got a side that, according to most experts, would finish anything between 4th and 14th in the NRL, right? So I basically want to separate my assessment of St. Helens from the rest of Super League. And I knew that the British... One thing that the reaction to this game has made me remember is, especially when I lived in England, rugby league people treat the game like a scarecrow would treat, or a farmer would treat anybody coming onto their land. Like if you say anything or do anything that looks like it might be bad, you're going to get shot at. And I tried to say that this doesn't mean anything vis-a-vis Super League. And was quite apologetic, and I got absolutely smashed on Facebook by people who said, oh, we've lost a lot of respect for you and this, that, and the other. The reality is, in my opinion, and it doesn't matter whether I'm British, Australian, Kiwi, American, whatever, St. Helens were more match ready for that day. They came here to Australia to achieve something. In Australia, in the NRL, there's a mandatory stand-down period. Nathan Cleary, et al., Stephen Crichton, et al., they weren't allowed back to train with Penrith until about 4 or 5 weeks before that game. That was their first game together. They were clunky. They weren't quite right. Their completions were poor. Their combinations were a little bit off. They obviously haven't worked out how to play without Kikau on one of the edges, without Coruscant at dummy half. This is all part of the process. St. Helens played with their full deck the week before, so they were in better nick. In 80 minutes, the game was 12-all. Like it was, and in that second half, I felt St. Helens were clinging on a little bit, but that's by the by. Full respect for St. Helens, but to think that this is some kind of proof that British Rugby League is where it should be, to me, is absolute balderdash. What it is what it proves is that any team can beat anybody on the day. And if a British person or a British team have got their backs to the wall, the chances are they'll come out swinging a bit. And they started the game better than Penrith and managed to put some points on the board.
Very early.
And that was enough points to keep them in it. And then they managed to get a drop goal. So, you know, as much as it doesn't mean the demise of Penrith, it also doesn't mean that Super League has now all of a sudden become this great competition and everything is fine in the rugby league, in the English rugby league world. Because like I said, there were 7 overseas players in that side. So it's not even a reflection of, and somebody else said, well, what about the overseas players in the Penrith side? I said, well, a lot of the Samoans and Tongans were actually born in Australia, number one. And number two, even the ones that are from overseas, they weren't born in England. So there was only 10 Englishmen on that field the other day, right? And most of the rest were from New Zealand, Australia, or somewhere like that. So, look, it's nice for British Rugby League. It really is. British Rugby League have always tended to have a better opinion of the World Club Challenge, but it should literally be seen for what it is, that St. Helens are leading things over there in England, and it's up to the others to catch up. It simply is up to the others to catch up. That's how I see it. And apparently that makes me a plastic pom, according to some and things like that, which, you know, honestly, get a life if you're going to write things like that. On the other side of the fence, Penrith. Chris, I'll start with you. What does that mean? Because they did seem to lack a little bit of punch, didn't they?
Oh, look, they did. But again, excuse me, again, it is a trial. And
COVID, lockdown, his coffee.
The NRL season's a very long season.
So it is a trial. Do you just call it a trial?
Well, it was for them, I think. They can kind of say what they want in the media, but I don't know that. Well, in other circumstances, like you said, you know, the players haven't been back training for as long. It's not full preparation. I think they did have a crack. But I don't think a World Club Challenge is ever an indicator of whether or not the Super League and the NRL is stronger anyway. If British Rugby League wants to prove it's strong, then win a World Cup.
And also maybe come out at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Yep. Or in the middle of the year.
But Penrith is still going to be strong. I think, depending, it's, you know, for years we used to ride off the Storm every time they'd lose 2 or 3 guns and they'd still back up. Whether Penrith has that system, that stability, I think this year is a good year to find out.
To be honest, I think they have, because they're one of the first. I think they're the only club ever to win all the trophies, and none of this is take away from what St. Helens did. I mean, the mental mountains they had to climb to come to the hot climate, to go out west where it's as hot as it gets, basically, and in Australia at times, and as humid as it gets at times. You know, real big kudos to them, and I think that's got lost in some of the commenting, basically. Taylor, unless you've got anything to say about Penrith, there's another team I want to talk. Another team I want to talk about later, because both of them you played for, the Dogs and the Dragons.
Yes.
So I want you just to think about your answers. I'll come back to you later about where you think they're at and everything else. James.
Yeah.
Paul Wellen says it's seismic for British Rugby League. Is that true?
I think St. Helens are a good standard team. And I think they've proved that over the years. I think they've got the same kind of dominance now that Wigan used to have with the trophies that they're winning.
Definitely.
They seem to have, because they're cleaning up everything.
Mm.
It's a great result it is a boost for British Rugby League.
Yep.
It is a boost because everybody. It is a shot in the arm, but I think there's got to be some kind of realism about the strength of the whole league, of all the teams in it, and I think so that's the case. I think going back to Penrith, I think they're going to miss Coruscant very much.
Penrith,
Penrith, and Kickow's immense. Kickow's immense. Going to miss him. So
Kickow's one of those players, isn't he, Taylor? You just sort of give him the ball, even if it's not the cleanest ball, he'll sort of run over someone and
that's right,
palm someone off.
And defensively very strong as well.
Yeah.
So, they're going to miss.
So Taylor, we've covered Penrith in detail. Now, what about your two old clubs, Dragons and the Dogs? Which one do you want to start with first? Because the Dragons, not only did they get obliterated off South for the second year in succession in the Charity Shield, they then did something that warranted some coverage in the local papers.
Well, let me start on the Bulldogs, purely because, the Dragons, obviously there's a little bit of extra, there's a bit of dessert to chat about there as well. The Bulldogs, can I say, watching that game on the weekend, I don't sit here and say, they're in trouble, they're in for a long year or anything like that when looking at these trial sides. I don't think anyone in the world honestly expected the Bulldogs to win the competition. I don't think anyone, yes, we all thought they were going to be a better year this year, but they had Kickow, Pangai Jr., a few people like that who are going to have to stand up and have big years for them. They were on the sideline. So am I overly concerned about that? No. But what it does do, and what it's done to the Dragons as well, is everyone just turned their head a bit and they just paid a little bit more attention to those teams. They had a little bit more of a peekaboo of what was going inside of the coaching boxes. There was a lot of chat about Anthony Griffin. He looked like he'd lost control in the box. Now, because your side's getting absolutely towed up, are the cameras more often than not going to come and have a look at you when you've conceded the try? Yes, they are. So are they going to pick up on your body language? Yes, they are. This is something for a coach that's already under pressure. I think that's the big thing this weekend, is the weight of the world must be on Anthony Griffin's shoulders. Now, for what happened after that, we saw players like Tyrell Sloan, he was crying with Latrell Mitchell. There's obviously some big emotions in that camp after that loss, some really big emotions.
Is the Charity Shield a trial, or is it?
It's a trial.
Is it a beefed up or slightly toned down round one? Because there's a shield involved.
I would agree with you that it's a beefed up, toned down round one. Yeah. And when I was at the club, it was certainly viewed as a big thing. Charity Shield was a big thing. And that's why I think if you've had a bad year, which the Dragons have had, and you're coming up against Souths who had a good year, and I think you talk it up in your head, you're going to have a big one, you're going to get up. Traditionally, sides will get up for those games against good teams. They didn't. They failed. They had a shocker of a day. You saw with Tyrell Sloan, there's obviously stuff going on in his personal life, but there is emotion in this side. And then what it sounds like's happened is they've gone and jumped on the schooners after a big loss. They've put everything into preseason. They thought they'd come up well. They've gone bad again. They're looking down the barrel of a bad year. I think it's just all pent up for them, and something needs to change. Something needs to stop. And all this incident at the bar or whatever's happened there has done is just expedited that process. I think down there in Wollongong, I think there's some real trouble brewing. And I think that's, I think that's probably the first place there'll be big changes, can I say, in the NRL early.
COVID, Chris, I'll come to you in a minute because you shared a thought with me today, which I tend to agree with, but I'll come to you in a sec. I'm just going to stay with Taylor a minute, just because my mate Rosie said on Facebook that one of the theories he had is that St. George might have gone into the game with heavy legs from training because they've actually got the bye in round one. Their season doesn't start for 3 weeks. And I thought that was really astute from him.
It's definitely a thought that could have happened, and it's really hard. It's hard to pull back the curtain happens on those clubs and all those things. You don't know what's
Mm.
happened. You don't know what the training load's been. Have they ramped up before the trial? I mean, I wouldn't have done it because it's your last real trial beforehand. You can always ramp up for another week and then come down afterwards, and pull the parachute a week later than other teams. I think the internal trial the Dragons had with Manly might have been to combat the fact that they had the bye in round one. So they really got an extra hit out that most other clubs didn't get. So for a club that had a trial against Manly, then they had the trial against St Helens, then they came into this game. I hope they were heavy, Lee. I hope they were heavy because they've sort of had more football than most other teams have at this stage.
COVID Chris did a little cough there that made it sound like he was thinking, what the hell are you going on about, Taylor? But we're going to give him benefit of the doubt because of his affliction. But Chris, you did say something today to me about that incident, in inverted commas. So unless I'm throwing you under a bus here, do you want to repeat that?
I just think it was a great example of media beat up when the headline on the news feed was that they were in a brawl, and the word brawl was actually used in the headline.
That's a lie.
And it was an argument. And if two grown men can't have an argument, far out, where are we going?
Yeah, well, me and Taylor brawl all the time then, if that's the case, you know.
Exactly.
Call me Floyd Mayweather. I'm undefeated there.
Can I make one point on the charity
your
shield?
Dolphins in the NRL world.
Oh, low blow. No, mate. No, we're not going there, Lee.
I'm going to write that in the thing, and we're going to go there. We are.
Can I make one point on the charity shield before we move on?
Yeah,
I'll just go. Hang on, let me just go to the committee. James, you happy with that? Yeah, Taylor, any objections? Yeah, you can make one more point. Away you go.
I think it will lose its emphasis, and it had more emphasis when it was the only trial that was televised, because it was. And now they're all televised. I think it'll lose its loss a little bit. It's really just another trial. To the punter, it may mean a lot to the Dragons and the Rabbitohs, but to the punter, it's a trial.
It was a train of thought 15 years ago, 16 years ago, that, and I heard it regularly, and I heard it when I was at Manly, that you just can't go all year. You can't go all year at high intensity. You have to time your runs, and you have to have a little dip and everything else. So that would also add weight to that theory that it is a little bit less in the scheme of things. James, Roosters, WTF?
Yeah, I'm actually just looking at the scores now from last weekend.
Oh God, he didn't do his research. Taylor didn't do his research.
No, but
you are the weakest link.
I'm being honest. That is a bad defeat though to Manly, because we talked about Manly possibly struggle this season. So like I say, it's early. It's early season, but we talked about Manly wouldn't be one of the greatest. So
Roosters are notorious slow starters, aren't they, Taylor? And but what does concern me is the amount of injuries they got. And another thing that concerns me is where a lot of them put their heads when they're tackling.
Yeah, there's certainly an issue there. I actually read a few good comments about defense and putting their heads, and people talking about this over the weekend. And one was from Adam Mogg, an old coach of mine. He had a really good point. And his point was, I know that the NRL are doing as much as possible to stop head knocks, to slow that roll and all that sort of thing. And one of the things that they've put to the clubs, and they're doing less of, is full contact sessions. They're slimming down on them. They're trying to stop them, all that sort of stuff, where they're trying to take the sting out of collision. Therefore, there's no head knocks at training, and you're not getting that gradual build up of small knocks and then a big bad one, for example. I think that might be hurting the players in that sort of instance, because you do need to practice what you are going to be doing. You do need to train with a similar intensity, if not the same intensity as you are in a game. Otherwise, it's a shock to the system. And the things that suffer are your technique. The things that suffer are because you can build those little lazy shortcuts into your defensive technique when you know someone's only coming at you 50%, when you know there's a pad involved. You don't do it consciously, but it can happen because you don't expect the brutality. You don't expect the force that's coming back at you. And I think that might be causing some of the issues in and around technique. It's a concern I have for the game. Are there better ways to do it? Yes. Do we have to sacrifice as many full contact sessions? No. I guess it comes down to, as we've spoken about, Lee, do you take the tackle out of the under 6 kids to protect them, or do you let them tackle when they're, 70 kilos lighter than they're going to be in 10 years, when they're learning at the lowest, that at that point. So it's really going to be ingrained in them how to tackle effectively. And I think the same thing applies to the NRL players.
Any other thoughts on that? Anyone else?
Oh,
I think
Rick,
yeah.
you got to practice. You got to practice what you want to put on the field. Otherwise, the muscle memory's not there. I must admit I didn't notice, and I haven't watched the Roosters game, so I wouldn't be able to comment on their technique. But yeah, if the first time you're going to go into 100% full contact is when you get on the field, then there's going to be all sorts of pain.
Well, the key is where you put your head in it safely at the side. That is the absolute key.
Okay, boys, I'm going to go back to England, and I'm going to go to an unsavoury incident. Because it's a coaching question, I believe. I'll have to deal with a couple of people who don't see it that way, but I think it's a coaching question. One of your players performs lewd acts in public. It gets filmed. You find out he's been on a 14-hour grog session 7 or 8 days before the opening round of Super League. In a press conference the following Thursday as coach, you say that the player is available definitely and he'll be up for playing definitely. He's had a good pre-season. I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do as a collective in 2023. And then after the game said, upset about the media focus around the issue. It's not what we should be talking about. We should have a team go over to Australia and beat Penrith Panthers. That should be frontline and centre of the media. So now he's trying to, he's a newspaper editor now. But unfortunately, we're talking about something else, and that's a slight frustration. It pisses me off when you have the start of a Super League campaign and so much going on around the game, and we make the Sun newspaper for this. There is so many angles I could go at with this, but what I'm going to do, Taylor, that's probably the first time you've heard all this come together, brought together. What do you think of that? So the player in question got fined 10K, 10,000 English, I think.
By who?
The club.
And what's happening with the police in regards to, is there an investigation? Is there charges being filed?
At the minute, no.
Okay. Well, the first thing is, like, obviously, if this came out, if I was a coach, tell me if I've done this wrong. The first things first is I would worry about the players' welfare. I'd make sure
100%.
they're in a good mind space. They've dealt with this sort of front on. They understand how it's out there, and have enough support around them to be able to handle what's coming their way, because it's coming hard, it's coming fast. You won't be able to stop it, so you need to be able to manage it. But just because you're supporting a player doesn't mean they shouldn't be punished for what they've done. They should 100% be punished for what they've done. And that needs to come from a club level to show that you're serious about it, show to your fans, to your stakeholders, to your sponsors that this is not acceptable and this is not how Castleford Tigers composes themselves in a public setting. Now, the reason why I asked what the police are doing about it is because here in Australia, if that came about, you would be charged with, all sorts of, lewd acts or whatever it sort of.
And the integrity unit would be all over it. And
integrity unit would be all over it, all those sorts of things, which obviously they don't have a system that sort of rivals that here in Australia. And as much as we sit back and sometimes we criticize the integrity unit about how they jump all over everything, I guess you can see this situation and almost appreciate them for what they would be doing in this sort of scenario. But I think that's, you can't just let that slide. To say they're available, you simply turn around and say, I'm unsure what's happening with that situation at the moment. We're still conducting an internal investigation. But to get off without any sort of consequence is baffling from the club. Yeah, $10,000 fine, yeah, sure, but
pounds.
So £10,000, which is, makes a massive difference as well with the conversion these days. But yeah, it's I don't see that as good enough, really, and I think it says a lot of things about the Castleford culture and about the coach, really.
Well, the team lost more games than they won last year and finished outside the finals places, so I'm starting to see some of the reasons why. Joe Westerman came to the game, Chris, And what do you think was waiting for him when he got off the bus?
I'd say a few cameras and flashes.
Correct. And even if it wasn't the paparazzi, you know that some mobile phones would be waiting for him, you know? And there's been a picture of him smiling, and that means he's doesn't care and everything else. Again, poorly managed by Castleford, isn't it? I mean,
well,
the fan chants came, you know, the fans were chanting some quite entertaining things, actually, but yeah.
I'd extend Taylor's point a little bit further. And yeah, you support somebody, but you don't enable behaviour. And I would suggest that really supporting somebody is to apply a consequence, because otherwise, what is he learning? And to me, it's extremely weak leadership.
I agree.
It's the smiling off the bus, that could be just his way of dealing with embarrassment.
Well, to be honest, there was other people smiling in behind him, so I assume something funny was said or whatever. You know, I don't judge him on that. What I judge is the club putting him in that position. You know, the common sense there is just non-existent. James, you're a punter in England. You go and watch games, right? You work hard and
play hard, I presume. The old bus driver, you.
No. But you know, I don't care what financial situation any of us are in now. But throughout all our lives, there'll be some point when we're counting the pennies, counting the dollars, counting the cents, and all we want to do is save up our money to watch our favourite team or do our favourite thing. And we all know that the rugby league club in our community is a huge part of some people's lives, to the point where those blokes on the field and now those ladies on the field are representing you. So, James, as somebody who's geographically closest to what's taken place, imagine your favourite team, Bradford Bulls, who you care about, are in Super League, and a week before the competition, so nothing else has happened, but a week before the competition, one of your players was so drunk that he didn't know what day of the week it was, and it's been reported he was out for 14 hours drinking. How would you feel about that? And if there's one gone out, we can probably assume that the rest may have been.
I feel it's unprofessional.
And then your team lost. So 8 days later, you took the journey to Hull, which, as we all know, to anybody who doesn't live in Hull, anywhere else in the rugby league world, travelling to Hull feels like travelling to the other side of the world, because it's the furthest east.
It's a trek.
And it's the one away game that some people miss out on because of said trek. So you're a hardy soul if you go there. How do you feel? And they go and lose the game, and in the first half, they have a stinker.
And then you see that they've had a 14-hour bender. Right?
Yeah, or one of the lads, yeah.
Wasn't it 30-0 at half time or something they were down?
Something. It wasn't pretty.
It wasn't. No. So yeah, you just feel that it is unprofessional, and that it's poor. That it's just a culture, probably the culture of the club. But coming back to it, I mean, and it looks bad because, I mean, Joe Westerman has been fined, but it's a fine that he can afford. You know, it's just financial suffering.
Well, I don't know.
But the woman in question was sacked from her job, so she's been sacked.
So I would say a real estate agent has dealt with it a lot better than Castleford Tigers and the RFL. To be fair, has the game not been brought into disrepute?
Well, it has.
So we've effectively got. I described it today on socials as a pornographic movie where the main actor fluffed his main part a little bit.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, definitely.
You know, it is, isn't it? It's a very quick movie because the cameraman, ran out of battery or whatever. But that's basically what it is. You see genitalia.
You do. Now, and it is bringing the sport into disrepute.
Yeah. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's also getting a lot of coverage, which is another conversational time. Right. We're all coaches, all four of us. Okay. This lands on your desk. We've covered it now. Who answered first? It was you, Taylor, wasn't it? You spoke first. So, Taylor, you're the coach. What are you doing?
I was brushing it off my desk. That's what I was doing there. It lands on my desk. I'm getting rid of it.
Yeah.
No, it's I don't. For me, it comes back to history for the player. Is this the first instance the player's been in? Is this the first really big drama publicly or whatnot that's happened for this player? I don't know if sacking that player is the right answer. There would be some severe punishments, a long-term missing out from the game, and things like that. But yeah, I don't know if I'd sack that player.
What would the NRL do?
The NRL would sack that player. The NRL would sack that player. The NRL would. And I'm not saying, that's the right thing either, but certainly telling everyone that he's available for round one and I can't wait to watch him play is almost like rubbing it in the face of the fans.
That is ridiculous.
That's the point that I don't like. Now, I don't think that punishment's tough enough. I just believe that give me some play history before I sack this man. Is all I'm saying, but I wouldn't be too far from it, and there would be a very tight rope. I'm talking a la Cameron Munster last year with the no alcohol for a year, things like that. Maybe a stint in rehab if that's a problem. If this is a continuous thing,
COVID, Chris.
Yeah, well, again, you'd have to look at the wider context of it. Definitely, there's got to be something a little more serious and a little more appropriate than just telling people he's picked for round one. Maybe if I was the coach, I might be a little worried myself if I knew that there was more than him out, and maybe it was something I knew about beforehand. I don't know. I don't know the details of it, but if there were other players out on the drink for 14 hours as well, then really it's time. If I was coach, I'd be either walking out myself because I've not got the balls to the testicular fortitude to deal with it, or I would deal with it in a much stronger way than what has been done, and a much more longer term attitude as well, rather than just thinking that we can sweep this under the carpet and all's good and well by round one. It's the type of behaviour that you can't condone. You accept that it continues, and I just I wouldn't tolerate it. Like Taylor said, I don't know that I would sack him, but I would certainly send a very clear message that behaviour isn't tolerated.
In saying that, Chris, like just speaking about it now, thinking about it as I'm sitting here, if this was, say, I'll put it into terms that you guys may be able to understand a little bit better. If you're in a classroom and something really big happens with one of the students, right? It's not often the teacher suspends them. It's not often the teacher expels. It comes down to the principal. It comes down to someone who has the whole school's interests at heart and looks at it from that top level. Why hasn't the Casper Tigers from a senior management level come down and said something? Why is it up to the coach? The coach should have been in a position where they said, well, unfortunately, Westerman's put his fate in the hands of these people. I can't comment on that. And why haven't they come down and sacked him?
I think I'd be asking my coach why any of my players has been doing 14 hours of drinking a week before the competition.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you're that top level and you're thinking about the whole club, which you have to, if you're the CEO, you're thinking about the club holistically, the future of the club, what this looks like, the brand, and things that are very different from a personal level on that lower tier. And I'd presume there'd be some serious conversations with the governing body, which would be the Super League. So,
the real estate agent, so the estate agent, to use the English phrase, I don't know what company it is, but they saw fit that 50% of the party involved in the issue, their 50%, couldn't represent their company anymore. The other 50%, Castleford and the Rugby Football League and Super League decided that they could represent them that weekend. When we think of it in that terms, I think in those terms, I think that's quite a significant statement. There'll be people who have played for Cass in the past. The ones who are no longer with us, I think they'll be rolling in their grave. But what does that club stand for, James?
I mean, I'll bring an example. What would you do? Well, if I were the coach, I'd be checking on Joe Westerman's welfare. Start with, I'd be with this mental health thing that.
100%. I think we all agree on that, don't we?
But what I'd do, I'd suspend him from the club for a period of time. Not sack him, but a club suspension. And that's the way I think I'd do it.
I think I'd do similar. If nothing else, just to let things die down. Just to.
Yeah. I'll give an example about the Castleford Club though from a few years ago, because the best player, one of the best players for them a few years ago was Justin Carney, and there was a scandal with Justin Carney when he left the club. Don't know. Do you remember it? Do you remember what the details were?
I don't remember that. Was it something to do with somebody else's wife?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and
did
that's
he
maybe
go?
a totally into club thing. But he was transferred.
Yeah,
they were gone.
Yeah, Look, I would do probably what you'd all do. I'd certainly step him down for a bit. I certainly wouldn't have let him play this weekend.
No, and
I would have made sure that if he wanted to be at the ground, he went in with some kind of bloody disguise on or something. Just he's not going there.
No,
hide him in the washing basket or something on the way in. But you're right. We're all in tune on the mental health. I mean, I don't know if it's 4 weeks, 6 weeks, or whatever, but I just know that Josh Maguire said something that wasn't too nice in a preseason friendly, and he got 7 matches. Now,
yeah.
If this was a school, right, and one kid swore at another student and got 5-day suspension, and then another kid was caught behind the bike sheds doing something he shouldn't do, and then the video went viral and people in public saw it and just got a detention and kept in class and kept at school, what would the kids at school say? Chris,
more importantly,
you're still working in school. What would the kids at school say?
And more importantly, Lee, what does it tacitly approve of the rest of the kids being allowed to do in future?
Yeah. So that
sends a message that's condoned.
Yeah. So that's that's the thing for me. So whether it's 4, 6, 10 weeks, whatever, I certainly think there's a case of keeping his employment for his mental health purposes, but it's probably so bad because it was the first round of the competition, but you could almost argue standing him down for the year. And I don't know if that's his contract or whatever, but it's a big one. This is something that's gone viral. He's had his bits hanging out, and it's not good. And you asked about the police. I'm sure if the police weren't under-resourced or whatever, there'd possibly be something in that too, because it's indecent exposure, isn't it? It's all of the above. So, look, I took my time to comment on this because I wanted to get my own thoughts straight on it without. And my big thought as well is to the 2 families that have been impacted. And that's the other thing. What does that message? What does the message send to the family, the 2 families that have been left behind from this massacre? Not a massacre. This disaster. This, it's not good. It's really poorly handled from Cass. Really, really badly. CBA, collective bargaining agreement, back in the land down under. The season launch, and this is only fresh. I mean, it's like I'm a roving reporter, Taylor, when I'm the host. I get the latest news as it comes in. The season launch has been scrapped so that there's no danger to it because of the tender negotiations with the players. Taylor.
Well, aren't things cutting it quite fine now, Lee? Aren't things cutting it quite fine now? I mean, to scrap a season launch, it tells me that they're really worried about how the negotiations are going. It tells me the NRL has no plan to budge on what they're bringing to the table. And I think they're asking the RLPA to flex their arms, really, if they want to turn this into a dogfight, and I think they will. Like, if you're going to the negotiation table and you're talking about, wanting to get this done and that done, but then you're cancelling events just in case it doesn't go through, just in case they're not happy. And you know what I mean? Like, you can't be bringing any good news to the table anytime soon, then, can you?
No.
And it also shows how much the RLPA has them on the run, and I don't think that's a good thing at all. I think it's a terrible thing for rugby league that we're even in this state to begin with. So, look, it's concerning. I'm concerned. The news of the women's CBA last week was really good, was great news. I thought if they're starting to discuss things at the table, if they're starting to take those little considerables on each side, let's talk about what we can sort out now and let's get through that and let's, and that's what you need. You need, when you're at negotiating tables, it's just a little concession one side will make on the other. I'm not happy with the big thing, but we can talk about this little one on the side and we'll meet somewhere in the middle. And then from there, you find another stepping stone, and from there, you find another stepping stone. And before you know it, you're halfway through it. But it sounds like they're hitting more rocks now, and that's an issue.
Boys, Chris?
Whose decision to cancel the season launch? Was it the NRL's?
I don't know. I would assume so, yeah. Because if you think about it, it would have been a good opportunity for, if there was video cameras there, players could just do something to disrupt it in some way, or sit down on the ground or something that would give things some more legs.
I've never watched the season launch, so it doesn't bother me too much.
No, but there'll be clips on the news and whatnot, won't there? And you can imagine if the 16 players all sat down, the 16 captains all sat down cross-legged on the floor, or something like that, or put their hands in the middle or something, made some kind of statement. That would be the news item, wouldn't it? It wouldn't be the.
I was more concerned with the Nathan Cleary report that the players want more of the share of the pie. And that was a couple of days ago or over the weekend.
Well, that is one of the sticking points, Chris. The players they used to get a certain percentage of the revenue. That percentage has decreased, even though they've gotten a pay rise. They want the same percentage of the pie that they've always had tipped into the players. Now, whether that be, they're talking about having better programs for athletes that only play a certain amount of games and don't typically get looked after, but they do want access to a bigger slice of the pie, than what they have.
Again, I think we're going down the road of alienating fans, and I think the players have to realise that they don't actually own the game, that the fans do. And there's no money at all if they alienate the fans.
Yeah, and the other thing is that media coverage generates interest in the game, which generates money for them. So you've got to be very careful with that. It's but I don't know who's made this decision, and we don't know. I mean, I think the conversations by all accounts have been going okay recently, but this was a bit of a jolt. I thought, well, it's going okay. Well, why not have a season launch? But anyway, this stuff is getting real. So, boys, I mean, I look at the professionalism of this. So many topics to discuss tonight. We've discussed the Roosters. We've discussed the Dogs. We've discussed the Dragons. We've discussed England, Saints, blah, 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 blah. We've discussed Castleford, CBA. But now we've got to go to Taylor's Dolphins. And because I'm so professional as a host, I've kept at least the last 7 minutes for us to talk about the Dolphins, who suffered at the hands of the Titans. I mean, I thought the Titans were everybody's whipping boys at times. So, Taylor, you've been bigging them up, saying undefeated as an NRL team, and then they slipped up in quite a big way at the weekend. Has the master coach got his biggest ever job on his hands?
Look, it certainly is a big job. I don't think we can say anything else about that. I wouldn't say his biggest job. He had some struggling years at Newcastle there, and he hasn't always been smooth sailing for Wayne Bennett. But look, I certainly think it was never going to be an easy season. There's combinations that need to gel there at the Dolphins that haven't been around for long. Milford's come back from the World Cup. Didn't really have the best game on Sunday. O'Sullivan's been there, like Bromwich's first game with a few of those big inclusions in the forward pack. So Marshall King as well. So look, it's not necessarily, it's not the end of the world, but it's not good signs either. In saying that, I thought,
he sounds despondent, doesn't he, Chris and James? I mean, he's not even. I mean, last week he puffed his chest out. The week before, puffed his chest out. This week he's got his head dipped. And it's not the end, doom and gloom. Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say before you rudely interrupted me to have a go at me was how good was it to see Kieran Foran play some good football in a Titans jersey.
That's deflection. We're talking about the Dolphins.
Against the Dolphins, mate, and Tremaine Spry as well back on the football.
Yeah, my boy.
Yeah, after a turbulent period of his life, I'm sure, where he got back to playing football last year, and I think this was his first outfit in a Titans jersey since the incident.
Joseph Stimson.
Joe Stimson was there as well. So
boy.
I think it's good signs for the Titans. It's still a trial game, so it is what it is. I don't know how much you're enjoying this. Seems like a lot. Do you want me to keep talking? I don't know. Just going to leave it where it is.
Okay. As you know, when the number one host is hosting this pod, I like to end with something non-rugby league related to discuss. And it tends to be related to something that I've suffered from that day, that week, or whatever. And today, it is, for some reason, I had to eat constantly. And that's not something I do.
Look down.
Despite, I can see it. I can see it. Can you see yours? Despite perceived appearances, I don't eat breakfast. I tend to have a late lunch. Yada yada yada. I don't snack a lot. Today, I have not stopped. Chris, have I got COVID?
Well, if you did have COVID, none of the food would have tasted any good because that's the first thing to go.
Taylor?
I don't know why I'm even responding to this question. What sort of question was it? It wasn't a question.
Somebody rang me on Saturday and they said one of the reasons they like listening, they did say listening to our pod, they said it's because of the je ne sais quoi between you and I, Taylor. And you know what else he said?
What?
He sleeps starkers. Now, maybe you two can get together in that bed that's behind you in the hotel room that you're obviously in and, compare notes in that regard. But what's wrong with talking about diet and nutrition? It's actually it's related to performance, actually, too. But look how sharp I am tonight on the pod.
You literally said, fellas, I've eaten all day. I don't know what's wrong. And
do you eat breakfast?
Then you said, do I have COVID? And I was like,
do you eat breakfast?
No, I don't. I don't eat breakfast.
Do you, Chris?
Absolutely.
Do you, James?
I do, yeah. The sixth the most important meal of the day.
I'm just going to say that. Now,
so.
All right. So, there's also some theories out there now on the interweb, on FaceTube and all that, right?
Intermittent fasting.
That there's intermittent fasting, but there's also thoughts out there that the way we've evolved as humans, we come from caveman days or whatever, and we used to go out, find something to eat, and eat it very quickly before anybody else stole it off us or killed us or whatever. And then we might go 2 or 3 days without eating, but it's only in recent times, in the evolutionary terms, that we've started eating 3 meals a day. And obviously 3 meals a day, who does that benefit? It benefits supermarkets because they have to sell a lot more food, right? How many of you have the afternoon nap where you go, you feel like you need something because you're having a drop in sugar level? If you don't eat breakfast, you tend not to have that, I find, personally. What about you, James? Don't substitute this for medical advice, people, by the way.
I think it just a lot of it depends what you eat. I mean,
what do you eat, James? You're an athlete. What do you eat?
I do try and eat a lot of fruit, and I try and not to eat too many takeaways, except when you're here for the Chinese.
Do you eat? What's wrong with takeaways, Taylor? What's wrong with takeaways, Chris? What's wrong with takeaways? If you have a takeaway, salad sandwich.
Oh well, that's true. Yeah, well, yeah. If you say it like that, yeah.
Right, or a takeaway chicken kebab with loads of salad and chicken. What's wrong with that?
Who does that?
What's wrong with takeaway curry? I'm asking a question. I'm not making a statement. This is the other thing that people don't understand. You ask a question and they accuse you for... Anyway, so if you get a curry, what's the difference between that and making it yourself? That's a question I'm asking.
The only thing I've taken away from this conversation is that when I need a haircut, I don't go see the doctor. I'm not going to sit here and take nutritionist advice off Lee Addison. That's not going to happen.
I'm not giving off. I'm asking questions about nutrition.
I'll answer your question, Lee. I'll answer your question.
Chris looks kind of fit, so I can understand if he's got something to say here. But respectfully, I think the other three fellas in the room, including myself, need to pipe down a little bit. And I said,
I was just going to say.
I said respectfully. I said
Well, that's down
respectfully.
to the first 2 years in your life,
Respectfully, yeah.
apparently. Anyway, but crack on.
The difference between a takeaway curry and one I've cooked myself is that I could eat a takeaway curry.
Thank you.
Certainly couldn't eat.
Thank you.
Certainly couldn't eat one I cooked
James,
myself.
how good is that Chinese chippy on whatever road it is, Lee's Road or something?
It is
Spare
very
ribs,
nice.
chips and curry. What did you get? I get spare ribs, chips and curry. And I liked them so much, I just like put my head in them and like, just
And I enjoyed them. Yeah. Salt and pepper chicken. I like salt and pepper chicken.
Yeah. What would you get
Yeah.
from a Chinese chippy, Taylor, if you were in England?
Never been to a Chinese chippy. What is a Chinese chippy?
What's a Chinese chippy?
A Chinese takeaway, but a chip shop as well.
I think you're just talking about just an Asian bloke that wants to build your house for you. That's all you're talking about.
So
here.
no, what do you get from the Chinese?
Well, I'm a
Look,
big
his eyes light up now.
I'm a big fan of Thai. I'm a Thai man, and I like a pad Thai. I love myself a
Okay.
pad Thai.
Chris?
Yeah, I'll look any curry. But I've got to ask you two Englishmen. I keep hearing about the English curries. Are the Australian curries, how
No.
do they compare?
They don't.
Don't they?
Okay.
No, I wouldn't know
No.
what the Australian curries are like, but
They don't. And I've got a feeling it might be something to do with the water, because I assume the people who make them on both sides of the earth still have the same heritage and background and whatnot. But I think it's actually the water taste subtle, because water goes through everything, doesn't it? Geez, I'm coming up with some wisdom. Favorite food on earth, Chris? Favorite food on earth? What is it?
Oh,
You
it's
need one
curry.
thing, your last meal now, you're sick. This could be it. What's your last meal?
It would either be a green Thai chicken curry or just a mishmash of Indian curry.
Taylor?
Well, fellas, I not long ago actually, I was down at the pub here at Gladstone. I was at the yacht club, the Gladstone Yacht Club. No, what I find.
So you're inebriated on the pod?
I'm not inebriated. No, I'm not inebriated. I was drinking mid-strength beers. Thank you very much.
So-
And I treated myself to a seafood basket. It had calamari, had beautiful bits of fish in there, had some prawns, and then I got some oysters as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say a nice seafood basket, hot and cold variety. That's just sensational.
So that's your favourite?
Yeah, as I sit here right now, that's what I've chosen. Yeah.
So that's your last meal? Mine's steak.
Nah, you can butcher a steak.
Medium well.
You can butcher
Medium well.
seafood too. But
James?
yeah, do quite like an English Sunday dinner roast carvery. Really, that's
Do ya?
Yeah.
roast carvery.
Mm.
So how do you have your steak, Lee? Medium well.
Yeah.
So when do you have to order it the day before, or how long does it take to come out? Medium
10
well.
10
What
minutes.
are you talking about? What do you?
How'd you
James?
have it? How'd you have it?
Rare.
Oh, why'd you bother even cooking it then?
So I don't have it blue. I have it rare.
Mm. What, you have it rarely or rare?
No, rare. I have it lots.
Who's feeling hungry now?
I'm
Not
going to
me.
say you're raising the stakes now.
James, how do you have your steak?
A bit more medium to well done, to be honest, Taylor. Yeah.
Ah,
Taylor never has a mistake.
what about you, Chris?
Well, butchered first, yes, Taylor. So it's
Yeah.
dead.
Yeah.
And then, medium rare. Still like
Yeah,
a
there
little
you
bit of pink. Still like a little bit of pink.
So what
Yeah,
you
a
trying
little
to
bit of-
prove, Taylor?
A little bit of pink in the middle. It's the best way to have it.
Mate,
What?
Right. Okay.
It's
We've gone quiet now.
yeah, you
I'm
ain't
looking at steaks on Uber Eats. That's why.
Yeah, it's all we're doing.
No. I don't know. I should probably call it a day for eating. I mean, I've had 3 meals and basically a load of ice cream. So
What have you eaten in your meals, Lee? Healthy stuff. Today?
yeah, I have a spaghetti carbonara thing.
So why is a spaghetti carbonara healthy? Here we go. Why is that healthy?
Well, it's not chips and gravy, is it?
Yeah, but you've got the same body type as me, where carbs hurt you.
Yeah, but I'm past caring. It comes a time in your life, Taylor, when you realise you're not going to get a 6-pack. And even when you're at your fittest, people still accuse you of being fat.
Mate, I got a 6-pack this afternoon. I'll probably get one tomorrow as well.
Do you know what I mean? You know how it is, don't you? Like when you train, you're absolute rack off. and you've even got a vein down the on your oblique because you're training so hard, but people still call you the fat bloke in the room. Like it's just, I don't know, it must be a posture thing or a bone thing or something. It's just, yeah.
It's your head, I reckon. Your head's
Yeah,
wide.
possibly.
Really wide head.
Yeah. And then you get people like Chris who just like can look at food, devour it, double the and then they're fine. And then you get people like me and you who just look at food and put on 5 kilos.
I could go for a run past Macca's and put on weight.
Yeah. And
I mean, it doesn't help that I stop in as well. But I mean...
And for some reason today, right, I share it with you. I almost felt like I wanted to keep eating until the point where I couldn't eat anymore.
Is that a rarity though?
It is, yeah. It is. It is, unless I'm like had a couple of beers or something. Yeah.
Well, ice cream is lethal, though, isn't it? Because if you get a tub of ice cream, you just have one more spoonful and everything.
Thank you, James. Thank you for the empathy. Yeah.
Yeah, it is lethal. I've done it myself.
Yeah. What about you, Taylor? Do you avoid the ice cream or?
I think that no wonder people come at you with so much vitriol in the comment section because you just wasted 10 minutes of their life with this chat. They just wait for you to say something.
I'll wait for the feedback from the listeners saying that last 10 minutes, Lee. Brilliant.
We should offer someone where they can come on with just the old current affair where they'd bring someone on that's a witness in a crime case and they'd have it all blacked out and they'd have a voice thing on them so they sound like this. I'd like to get someone on here to tell us how they really feel about you, Lee. All these people in the comments.
Mate, open invite from me. Honestly, some of these keyboard warriors, let's go get them on here and we'll
I think you love it when they give it back to you, Lee. You're a bit of a masochist, mate. You love it when they give it back to you.
I don't mind, I don't mind anybody having a Barney with me. I don't mind that at all. But if they're going to start being personal, and there's people in Britain. One of them said I must have lost my head. My head must have gone to think that whatever I thought. And I must have wrote the nicest piece. I thought I wrote the most pleasant piece about, I'm sorry, guys, but I don't think this means anything for British Rugby League. I obviously said it at a time when emotions were high, but that's what gets to me. Sorry, it doesn't get to me. I just block them. I don't mind. I do love a good argument. I wish some of you would argue on this pod sometimes. Say, Lee, you're talking rubbish. I don't mind that. I think that's what's missing out of society, We're all too worried about upsetting each other. But there's nothing wrong with a good joust, is there, Chris? It's
not at all. Not at all. I just assumed you knew that we disagreed with everything you said. I didn't know that it had to be stated.
I hope you don't mind me sharing this, Taylor. But the guy who rang up last week and said you and I used to really butt heads in your year 11, didn't we? I never crossed the line as a teacher in terms of I didn't do anything bad, but I was always disciplining you. You probably crossed some lines as a student, but you didn't do anything like set the school on fire. So you didn't do anything that would ever get. But the reality is, the start of our relationship, so the first 12 months of our relationship, mate, did we ever have a civil conversation with each other at any point? Was it?
Probably not.
And I know you were a kid in essence, 16-year-old, 17-year-old, but you were an intelligent kid and you weren't daft and you probably knew to an extent what you were doing, but didn't know on the other side. But did it not build our complete and utter respect for each other as well? Because we wouldn't back down and
I think
we knew where the boundaries were. And
I just think I was a kid that had needed a lot of feeling out period of where I stood. And then once you and I sort of felt out where things were and where they shook and fell down from that point, then I think after a certain point it was fine. And then it was, then it was fruitful on both of our ends, after that. So
it's funny, isn't it? And guess what? I didn't give you a jersey, did I? And I reckon the cast coach could have probably done the same thing and got the same kind of, seriously. I mean, I to your point, Chris, I don't mind having a joust, a verbal argument with anyone. I think it's fine. I wish some of them would come on here. I do Facebook Lives. I'll start them again soon. I wish they'd come on and have a go. Honestly, it's fine, Us British like a bit of an argument, don't we, James? We're good at it, you know.
Debate is healthy. Debate
right.
is healthy.
Yeah.
But I mean, some people just hide behind keyboards, and that's all they'll do, innit? They won't quite expand on it. But then they don't know how to conduct themselves, so they start using language they shouldn't be using.
Yeah.
Because they don't know how to be articulate, really.
No worries. Now, listen,
the
boys.
testament to an argument, though, is whether or not you've improved or expanded your thinking. I mean, if all you do is talk, you don't learn anything.
Taylor,
Listen to other people's
are you
opinions.
listening, Taylor?
I hope you don't expand anymore, Lee. That expand your thinking and explode that head. You've almost got the gap between your two posters covered.
What, with my head?
Yeah.
No, I put them around my head. I've got a big head, actually. Like, physically a big head.
Head like a soccer ball.
You know what's amazing, though, as well? Like, my shoulders, like, the fact that they still look big with a head this size. I mean, you know, going well,
Yeah. Yeah. Did you have a good left or right shoulder, Lee, when you were playing?
Right shoulder.
Right shoulder?
Yeah.
I wish they'd pull out some old clips. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it.
Let's get the old VHSs out somewhere.
Have you got a VHS somewhere?
There's no DVDs when I was running around, lad, trust me. DVDs, even they've gone now, haven't they? So
yeah.
All good, lads.
Good.
All right.
All right.
See you next week.
Been fun.
I want to go to bed and I want to get nude, so you better turn this podcast off.
The video on Rugby League Coach Late Night with Taylor Brown.
Yeah.